Know that leadership from the federal level has been inadequate, to say the least. Um, Maybe that's the case too at the state level, and certainly as individuals. Not everyone in our communities have done what's been asked of them by those that have asked for us to act responsibly. And so I just want to take this opportunity in this setting to remind people and to encourage people to socially distance, to wear masks when outdoors, and to avoid the behavior that we now know that the scientists tell us creates community spread. And the reason I bring that up in this setting is because anything that impacts Americans impacts communities of color within the U.S. Significantly more. Every single policy, every single harm. When we look at the impact, it is dependent, disparately dependent on factors like race and income, immigration status, and other factors like that. And so that's part of the reason we're here to look at these issues around policing. But it's important to understand that in every system that we look at, we see those disparities, and issues related to public health are certainly no exception. So I just wanted to note that as we continue our own work. I also want to note that we've been doing this for a little while, and I know that especially for anyone who participated in any way in our record-tying 6-night town meeting, including town staff, that this has been an exhausting couple weeks, notwithstanding the break that some folks got over Thanksgiving. We've got 2 more meetings before a winter break that's coming up. So our next meeting is December 11th, and the meeting after that is December 18th. The next Friday would be Christmas Day. Not that everyone on this call celebrates, but I imagine everyone would appreciate having that day off. And the next day after that, the next week after that is New Year's Day. We're going to take that week off too. So we're going to go for 2 more weeks after this, and then we're going to get 2 weeks off before jumping right back into it in the new year. Okay. So I just want to lay that out for folks. Let me just run down the agenda, then I'll see if you have any announcements, and if not, we'll get right into it. We are going to approve the meeting minutes from Friday, November 20th. Then we've got lined up, there's a space for discussion on this bill, the Mass Police Reform Bill. It's got a longer name than that. S 2800 is the number on the Senate side. And if anybody has any thoughts on that, I know there may be some implications for our work. So I just wanted to raise that and provide space to talk about that. Another update on the policing survey. This is the one that we engaged with Tufts University on. So we'll talk about that. And then we have part 2 of that presentation by former Chief Dan O'Leary on traffic stops. And then we have an opportunity for subcommittee updates. I see department analysis on there, but there may be others. And then I really want to spend just a little bit of time toward the end just talking about, there are the others. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about sort of expectations for the next couple weeks, see where you are, and really get a better sense of what we need to be doing. I'm hoping to use the break as a bit of a working break to move some of the writing of the report forward as we sort of based on what we already have. So I'm very curious to hear where you are, what so make sure to incorporate that into your remarks later on. Okay, so any other announcements or things folks would like to say before we get into it? Alexander.
So some of you folks may have heard, came out last week, the Boston Globe put together a database of the last 10 years of disciplinary action and misconduct records within the Boston Police Department. So this would not cover officers in Brookline PD, but it is an extraordinary step in the long fight across the country to make these types of records more public. And as we all know, this type of information is crucial in assessing officer credibility. I've talked a couple times before in this task force about that and about police officers not always telling the truth on the stand or in police reports. But what's really extraordinary about this database is that DA Rachel Rollins back in like September published what's called the Brady List, which is the list of, to state it very briefly, the list of officers whose the conduct is so bad that essentially when they're the crucial witness in a case, most often the Commonwealth will just drop it and not proceed. And there are, I think, 126, 136 names on this list. This list has, I want to say 1,200. I've got it open in front of me. 101,553 officers, all here by name. So I'm going to drop the link to that in the chat, and it's an extraordinary step forward in making this type of information more public.
Thank you so much for that, Alexander. Anything else? Okay, let's get into it. First order of business is to the question of approving the meeting minutes for Friday, November 20th. Any discussion before we go ahead with approval on that? Okay, well then let's do it. Again, helpful if you unmute yourselves. We're going to go down the line and either aye or yes, no or nay, or abstain. Malcolm?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chi-Chi?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Eitan?
Yes.
Alexander?
Yes.
Kimberly? Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Almas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And as always, thank you very much, Devin, for helping put those together for us. Really appreciate you. Okay, next up, mass police reform bill discussion. This was long awaited. There were about 4 months of work done on this bill. It was done. The latter part of this work anyway was done in conference committee in secret in order to try to sort of reach consensus and move it forward. And then votes were very quickly taken by the House and the Senate, or the Senate and then the House. I'll just say, I've read a lot of pieces now on this bill, and despite those two facts, there are a lot of folks who've been advocates of certainly reform of policing that are happy with some aspects of this. It's a 129-page bill. I still haven't read through it all myself, and I look forward to. But I did get to see some highlights and understand that there might be some implications for our work. I do hope that, in particular, the school resource officer subcommittee looks at some of the changes that are being proposed there. I say proposed because it's been passed by the state legislature, but not yet signed by the governor. And so the governor could come back with some changes that he'd like to see, or he could simply sign the bill. So we don't know yet. So I don't know if others have any thoughts on this or anything they'd like to add. I just wanted to provide this space in case you do.
I thought Governor Baker actually had his own draft of a more, more narrow reform bill. I could be mistaken. It's been kind of a crazy week, but I thought that is what I remembered reading and hearing. And so it'll be interesting to see. I actually, because of the blurry week, didn't know it had got to his desk already. So.
Yep. Anyone else?
I'd like to speak a little bit to the response of police and police organizations to this bill. I want to say that I'm disgusted but not surprised with the type of language that we've seen coming out from organizations of police, where this is like, I have not read all 190 plus pages of this bill. But from what I have read of it across various news reports, what they're working on is trying to shut down some of the more egregious police practices. I can't speak, I haven't come to my own conclusion about whether I think this bill goes far enough or not or anything like that. So I'm not going to speak to that. What I will speak to is that, I'm looking at the CNN, and I think this is really encapsulates the problem from the Fraternal Order of Police, which we all know can be quite the radical organization. Obviously, we're disappointed. I think this whole thing is a knee-jerk reaction to something that didn't take place in Massachusetts. This is the conversation that we've had so often in Brookline of folks being like, well, it didn't happen here, even though, we know that racist police action has happened in Brookline. And it's just that the folks who have repeatedly reported it and spoken about it just aren't being listened to. It's the whole, this is happening off somewhere else in the country, off somewhere, wherever. And we've said here in this task force, and people have said to us, well, that's something that happens in Boston. Right? I personally, I think there may be very few of us, at least only on this task force, who don't know people who've been brutalized by police, right? So I think this this response is a really good encapsulation of just that attitude, and I think it's really important to sit here and be like, well, at a certain point, this does happen somewhere, and we got to take some kind of responsibility. But that's clearly not happening here in Massachusetts. And it's very interesting to me, I was hearing about this back in the summer when they were starting to debate this, that they were begging for folks in favor of the bill to call into the legislators because police organizations had organized police officers to call in en masse in opposition to the bill. And other folks weren't as organized. So I'm really not impressed by the tenor of a lot of the responses that I've seen from police, but I think it's a really good example of what we've been talking about here.
Thanks, Alexander. Right. Anyone else? Chichi?
I just want to follow up on Alexander's point. First of all, to thank him for both sets of insightful points, but also, this line of this idea that it doesn't happen in Brookline, it happens in other communities. One of the arguments of pushback we kept getting is, we need more police, or you can't look at statistics by race based on comparing it to Brookline residents because we're surrounded by Boston. So it's okay to look at Brookline in an aggregate with Boston when we're supporting policing, but when it comes to this globe analysis about abuses, oh, well, that's Boston, that's not Brookline. And I think we need to point out the double standard here. I'm glad Alexander and Raul, you've both taken the time to look at these analysis from the Globe and also the new bill that came out of the conference.
Thanks, Chichi. Okay. All right, we'll keep our eyes on this. Maybe we'll have another opportunity to comment once the final bill is signed, and I'm not sure when that might happen, but we'll keep an eye on it. Okay, next up we have an update. I think this is you, Eitan, on the policing survey.
Sure, just very briefly. So the surveys in the field, we've had. I don't have the right numbers right now at me, but I gave them to Raul yesterday. It was like 900 or something folks all together who have taken it. We could use higher numbers, particularly among African Americans and Latino participants. I think we have something between African American and Latino, something like 50, 55 respondents so far. That's going to be enough for a basic statistical analysis, but it would be great to have more. We don't yet know response rates if they differ by racial subgroup. We won't really know that. We need to get more information about mail that wasn't delivered to understand response rates. But right now, yeah, we just in the next week, we would, we're hoping for, double or so the responses from African American Latinos in particular. So it's probably gonna be another couple weeks, probably during the last couple weeks of December. I'll start digging into the data. But in the meantime, if I wanted to encourage folks to reach out to people they know, particularly in communities of color, and get the word out to take the survey.
Yeah, this is critical. It really is at this point going to be up to members of this task force to help amplify this. I do want to ask Devin, we sent out as a town, a press release about this, which was helpful in so much as some of us could actually forward that along to other people and say, hey, here's all the information. We'd like you to do this instead of just drafting something new. I'm wondering if we could actually send a reminder, and then the task force can amplify that reminder about the survey, if that's possible.
Yeah. Yep, we can do that.
Okay, great. And I imagine that would happen sometime early next week.
I can have it scheduled to go out on Monday.
Okay. All right, great. That for many people, those letters are still sitting in their pile of mail, and simply calling their attention to it and letting making them aware of exactly what it is in there. It's unfortunately not a letter of admissions to Tufts University, but it is a survey, a really important survey that we hope folks will complete. And so particularly folks from communities of color, I appreciate that we've got enough perhaps for a statistical analysis, but I want to make sure that we hear from as many people as possible as well. So
let me just follow up real quick, which is to say that just remember that we tried to send it to every single person who lives in BHA housing. So, it's possible we missed people because some of the addresses were a little messy. And of course there's moves all the time. We sent out 25,000 letters, but a huge number of those come back as undeliverable. I don't know how many for this survey, but the last time I did a survey in Brookline, the lists are not perfectly clean. So a lot of, but nevertheless, we try to send it out to every single person in BHA housing, and everyone whose, name signals there's like a 10% chance they might be African-American or Latino based on their name. So reach out. If you know of someone who wants to fill out the survey, they say they fill, by the way, sorry, I said this yesterday, but I'll say it again. For those who don't know this, I only learned it earlier this year that a lot of people check their mail like weekly, not daily. And the younger you are, the less frequently you check your mail, to the point where some people don't check their mail at all. In fact, we have a big problem among young people who don't, when they move, they don't fill out the change of address form at the post office because they really don't interact with the postal service very much at all. Okay, but if you know someone who said, oh yeah, I think I got it, but I can't find it, and they want to take it, we can get them a link by email if they want to fill it out. So you can just email me, and I will do that. If it turns out that they they actually didn't get it, we'll know that, right? We'll be able to, we'll look them up and get them a direct link. It looks like I was not in the sample, so I couldn't, call Professor Shafter and say, what's my link? I don't have one. But if you have one, then we should be able to get it to you.
I did have at least one person reach out to me and say that they know they got the letter, lost it, and we were able to get her her link with with her code to be able to complete that survey. So yeah. Any thoughts or any questions on this? Anne?
Two brief questions. One, have flyers been posted anywhere in town? And if so, great, can we do more? And if not, can we do some?
I don't think that either departmental analysis committee or engagement committee did anything like that.
Okay, because that might be helpful for folks who, again, might not be checking their mail or seeing something from Tufts and throwing it out saying this isn't relevant to me. If we actually post some flyers letting people know this is something they should look for, that might be helpful. And also regarding the website, there's a website link? Could we put that on a flyer for younger people who might be much more willing to fill out a survey like this online versus something that comes in the mail?
Well, the survey's all online. Everyone's taking the survey online.
It's there are certain people that have been invited to complete the survey, and when you get that letter, you actually have a unique code just for you. And so that's how people are. We're not able to just say, hey, anyone, please complete the survey. It was the sort of those 25,000 letters that went out inviting people. Those are the folks that are invited to complete it.
So can we make that, how could we put that in a flyer, that information to reach more people? Possibly.
We could have a flyer that says, "Did you get a? You know, if you got a solicitation to take a survey, please take it and contact us if you want to take it, but can't find your. You know, you could have a flyer with that kind of information. There's a lot of people with hands up, so maybe these people have suggestions.
Yeah, let's go with Chichi first.
I think one thing you could do for a flyer is I sent an email to the Brookline Asian American Family Listserv with a picture of the envelope saying, did you get this envelope? Don't throw it away. It's an important survey. So I think you could put something like that in the flyer, and then something about if you did lose the mailing, contact, and contact information for Tufts to get the link. I think a flyer is a good idea. That obviously takes some amount of work to design and post the flyer. As I said, I sent it to a listserv I run. I'm wondering if there are other lists, especially lists that focus on other communities of color.
Chichi, you've been muted. I don't know why.
Oh, I'm trying to.
Oh, again.
I was trying to get all fancy and use this Zoom feature to temporarily unmute myself, but obviously it doesn't work very well. So I don't know what part I cut out. I think I told you I sent an email to the Bathan listserv, and I'm wondering if there are similar listservs for other communities of color that an email can be sent to, because flyers obviously take a lot of resources to post. And then we had talked at one point maybe about trying to do outreach to BHA residents to encourage them to fill out the survey, not officially from BHA, but some sort of unofficial means that wouldn't feel as putting as much pressure on the residents. Right. So I don't know if there's any possibility of that.
Bonnie, I don't know if you can respond to that, but I knew you had your hand up.
Yeah, I don't entirely have a solution to that, because I think also what we're running into is the fact that we don't have those relationships. That people are, looking at this like a survey. So the fact that we don't have that groundwork laid is also going to take a toll on the ability to get responses to this, because I'm sure, I don't know. Yeah, I had a larger point and then I lowered my hand and
all right, we can go back if you like.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. I would just note, a decision was made a few weeks back, maybe longer, in our conversation around this, not to ask the BHA leadership to send an email or note to residents to encourage them to complete the survey. Whether or not we want to revisit that at this point, we can or not. Maybe the same reasons that folks thought that was a bad idea still hold today. But I do think that has limited our ability to engage with that community in a meaningful way, because I I don't know that we replaced that idea with anything else, but I could have missed something, but I'm not sure about that. So it's not just that we didn't do that, it's that we also didn't have anything else to do instead of that, to do outreach to that community, but I'll leave it there. Mike?
Yeah, a flyer is, we're talking about a 19th century idea to communicate with people in the 21st century, I think. It might be a good idea, but it is labor intensive. You do have to design it. Somebody has to get in and post it and so forth. But how about, I'm a little bit out of my depth because I'm 20th century, but Instagram, Facebook, there have to be mechanisms that lots of people will be looking at in the just in the community at large, no matter the housing authority, and particularly younger people. So I think that's probably the most expeditious way. And the other thing, Rose, I don't know whether you want to do this. It's sort of along the same lines as the asking the BHA to help. But the town has the ability to send, I believe, has the ability to send text messages and certainly telephone messages to people in town, and an alert that way might get some notice.
Yeah, I'll save Town Administrator Mel Kleckner the trouble of saying that we use that system very sparingly and almost exclusively in the case of emergencies, and it's something that we don't want to have folks in the community start to disregard those messages because they get too many of them, even though there are really important reasons why we might want to use them. We try to use that as sparingly as possible. Yeah. Mel even jumped off and came back on. Malcolm.
Yeah, I did just want to say I did personally reach out to Steps to Success as another way to get into Brookline public housing, and the leaders on the school side as well as the Steps Inc. side agreed, but I have not followed up with them, so I have no idea. It's been a crazy few weeks, so I have no idea if certainly I would think they have other priorities. But I can follow up and see, because that was another avenue, I think, where people who work with Steps trust them and trust their message. And I included the press release as well as I think maybe a patch or a tab article that had written about the survey. But I can follow up with them and see see where they've gotten with it, because that was sort of my other avenue to try to figure out.
So we have, let's revisit the networks that we reached out to before, and let's think about other networks to engage with. I take the points about social as well, if that's something that you have access to share on social. I thought Chi-Chi's email was very good. I don't know if everybody got a chance to see that. If not, maybe that's something that can be shared with the whole task force, and so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It did include that sort of image of the piece of mail, which I thought was really critical, so people can see, okay, this is exactly what she's talking about. I will double down myself on sending through my networks as well, and I'll send a reminder to town meeting about it too, and encourage them, because they've got lots of networks, encourage them to reach out through their own networks as well. And there's certain folks in my mind right now whose names I won't say publicly that I know have really extensive lists that reach people of color in the community, and I'll ask them to forward the message to.
Just follow up by say, I want to just thank you for doing that and raise a little bit of alarm here. This was, supposed to be an important part of a multi-pronged strategy to get community input, and we haven't been able to execute on some of the other mechanisms for community input yet, and I'm a little worried that it all comes down to the survey. I think the survey is going to be great, and we're going to have that, but I don't want that to happen. That the survey is the only mechanism for community input. But in light of where we are with other things, I do think it's critical to get that message out.
Eitan, when do you think, so we've got 2 meetings left, the 11th or the 18th, so I guess I'm asking you which one. Do you think we'll be able to get, I don't know if it's an interim report on the results of this survey, or, you know, what do you think? Or is that too soon?
So you're talking the end of the semester and grading too here. I would say that what was in my head was after that point, when some of you are celebrating Christmas, I'll spend my Christmas doing some data analysis. So I think the first meeting after we come back, I will be able to give a detailed report of where the survey is, show graphs and things like that. I don't think I can do it next week or the week after.
I think that's reasonable. That's very reasonable. Yeah. Anyone else on this? Okay. All right. Let's see. Next up, we have our traffic stop data presentation continued by Dan. I see you there, Dan. Let's do this. It's 8:34, and so we've made pretty good time today. But I don't want this to be an hour-long presentation or discussion. I want to see, because we have important work on the back end of it, understanding where our subcommittees are, because I really do want to have a sense of where everybody is leading into our next couple weeks that we have. So I'm building on our presentation before. Let's hear a little bit more from Dan, see what questions we have, and really focus in here. So Dan, what do you have for us today?
Okay, well, I actually want to give a quick overview of what you looked at. I know that we sent the charts and a cover letter to get put in the folder back on Tuesday or Wednesday. So hopefully you got a chance to look at it. And I'll just quickly, I think what I'll do is quickly go over it and then open it to questions. I think that's probably the best way to get through it.
Sounds great.
So one of the first chart you have in there is the citation arrest by offenses for 18 and 19. It's very similar to what you saw a couple of weeks ago. It's a little bit more detailed now because there's a category of all the charges that were lodged against the driver. And the only thing that I would caution you is when you look at the numbers and the actual cases, when they're shaded, you could have like 5 unshaded lit lines of information, but the 6th one may have 2 or 4 or 5 shaded ones following it. Those 4 or 5 shaded lines are all one arrest, and the amount of charges. It's just on traffic offenses, you have to write a citation. So in order to get it into court, you gotta put everything down on a citation. Then I sent you some questions that came up were on searches. That last couple of weeks, the meeting a couple of weeks ago, I answered that in the first paragraph, that there are no non-inventory searches done, but there was, and it's allowed by our policy and by law that anytime we tow a car, we have to take a look through the car for valuables that are left in there, and we take them and secure them in the station and mark them on the tow sheet that is signed by the officer as well as the tow truck driver. Then there was some questions brought up early on. Malcolm, we didn't forget. You asked to get some citations that were by locations, and just a little correction to my my cover sheet. The citation by location that has the street only, in order to make that list, you had to have 10. The streets had to have 10 or more citations written on them.
Can I just we'll continue through. I do want to show some of these as well, because I think not everybody knows what you're talking about. So, or has had a chance to look at it. So I want to see if I can do a share screen, maybe on this one in particular. You're saying these are the ones by location, right?
Yep, go ahead. I'll wait to get up the screen.
Yeah, let me do that. Oh, Devin, I think you need to give me the permission to do that.
It's all set.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, looks like we're up.
Okay. These are the individual citations that are issued to these streets, 10 or more tickets on the streets for each one of those 2 years.
Oh, and these are by whether or not they were Brookline residents or not. I have separately the one by location. Sorry about that. But maybe
no, these are location here. We don't,
Oh,
Brookline residents was the second email that we sent, I think on Wednesday, was it? Tuesday or Wednesday?
What I'm seeing on my screen, I think is what you're seeing is different on your screen, but if you can see it, go ahead. That's good.
I see it's the citations by location. Okay, so that's good. The individual streets, and that's the numbers of citations that were issued on each. Okay, if you hit the intersection total, I don't know if you can, we're on the same one here.
Give me 1 second. Let me just, give me 1 second. For some reason, I was seeing a different document than you were. I'm just Xing out of some other stuff, so it's not showing up on my screen. Okay, this should do it. Okay, and what would you like me to do here?
Hit the intersection total on the bottom. The bottom of the page.
Oh, there you go. Sorry about that.
Okay, so you take a look at, these are the intersections. We didn't, contrary to what I wrote, it's any tickets that were noted as the location of the violation was an intersection. Those are put on here.
Mm-hmm. And if we looked at it, I was able to just do a quick sort by, if you want to look at the most, the most common intersections. This is 2019 and this is 2018 on the left over there. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're looking at 2019 here on the right. So it looks like Route 9 and then corner of Boylston, Route 9 in Cypress, Beacon Street, Harvard Street, Beacon Harvard, and so on.
And you can see those are all highly trafficked routes as well.
Right. And this is one, Dan, where you and I, we looked at it initially. Dan and I talked earlier this week. This was actually raised by a question by Malcolm to look at the the geography of where traffic stops are taking place. And maybe we can get into a larger conversation at this, Dan, after you're done saying what you prepared to say. But nothing immediately was jumping out to me, but I think we need to look a little bit deeper into these numbers. Eitan and I and the rest of the group in our departmental analysis meeting yesterday said there may be a way to determine whether or not there's any statistical differences, significant differences between stops near, let's say, public housing and elsewhere. But, okay. Sorry about that, Dan. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I can't add much more to that. I mean, you just really have to take a look at the numbers, and right. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them, try to describe the intersection or why some more attention is being paid there than elsewhere. There was another chart on there, and it was the speeding. A lot of conversation a couple of weeks ago was surrounding speeding. So we took a look at the arrests, because we're doing arrests this week on speeding. There were 3 out of those total traffic arrests. There were 3 arrests that had speed as one of their charges. And on the cover letter, I included the total amount of charges that were lodged against the driver. Like I said, there's 3, total of 3, 1 in 2018, 2 in 2019. And that is really kind of the overview. I think in the interest of time, if people have some questions, here I am.
All right. So these are in the packet that was shared with everyone and should be available to the public as well. So I'll make it so we can see each other on screen. What questions do you still have remaining, folks? Let me start by asking this. It seems that, Dan, there's a few. Let's walk us through a few things. One, and I'll just sort of list them out, and then maybe you can walk us through. One, I'm very interested in learning. Actually, let me take a step back. We'll talk in our departmental analysis subcommittee sort of meeting update about where we are on our work. But one of the things that we know about traffic enforcement is that we are preempted in some ways for making certain changes. Like last week, we were talking about maybe civilian traffic enforcement, and there's some state preemption. What that means is that there are state laws that require police to do traffic enforcement. Now that doesn't mean, again, we're a reimagining group, and if if every time we hit a no, we just sort of laid down, and gave up, then we wouldn't be a particularly good one. So we may be interested in saying, well, that's all well and good, but we think there's another way, and we'd like to encourage, or figure out a way that Brookline can work with the state to make some changes to those laws if that's what we think is necessary. With that said, it's important to understand, where there might be disparate impacts for communities of color in Brookline in particular. And one of the chief ways that police engage with the public is through traffic stops. And you see the vast number of them, the sheer number of them, and it's important to understand the differences here. Two things I wanted to touch on. One, let's just start with one. One, you mentioned, I asked earlier, I think last week, and then we talked about the notion of sort of action after a stop, right? So someone gets stopped for a routine violation. Even speeding is a routine violation unless it's related to reckless driving, right? I mean, plenty of good people speed all the time, right? And so what, how that somehow might lead to either someone being asked to leave their car or their car being searched. And what I've gotten from you, Dan, and please tell me if this is right or wrong, is at least according to policy, that should very rarely happen. And if it does, there need to be very specific reasons for that to happen. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And I was noting the sort of the Sandra Bland stop, the failure to signal is what she got stopped for, and then later on, she ends up being dragged out of her car because she refuses to leave her car, right? And that's not something that at least would be within policy, is to ask someone to leave their car if all they did was to failure to signal.
Right. If you're asking somebody to leave the car, you have to have a reason for doing that. I think most times you see an officer would be telling the person to get back in the car because it's safer with the person inside than it is outside wandering around when the officer's writing a ticket. Probably has his or her head down. So.
Right. And one thing that's difficult for us to determine is whether or not, like, to what extent, I don't know whether or not things like dash cams or body cams, things that are being bargained with the union right now, would make a difference here. But to what extent everyday officers are actually sort of following that training. But so that seems to be one. The other thing that we talked about was why people get stopped where, and it seems to be that's as much of a function of where police are stationed than much of anything else. Is that right?
It could be both, yes, or both, meaning another reason. But yeah, I told the committee on more than one occasion that probably the number one complaint that we get is traffic and parking related from the residents about what's going on in their neighborhoods. And so we respond to those complaints. And if there's a complaint of speeding and it's verified in the neighborhood, or running a stop sign, or not paying attention to the lights, we'll station an officer there, or the officer will see it as one of our notes that we give out to them in roll call or over the computer, and they should know enough to assign themselves, take themselves off to give some enforcement and make it known that they're looking at the stop sign in order to try to eliminate the problem in the neighborhood. There's also times when our traffic officers will set up a radar at different locations, such as Lee Street, probably up by the golf course, Route 9. Those kind of when you tend to get people going at a little bit of high speeds. And then you just see when an officer's patrolling around and he or she sees a violation, makes a stop. I mean, they're all different kinds for doing it. I will talk about one thing that came up in the meeting yesterday, and it's come up before. When you're talking about making a stop, the way it usually happens is that a violation gets committed. The officer observes a violation. The officer can then make a decision to pull a car over or not. Now, in each one of our cars, there's a laptop. The laptop goes to the computers computers get back information to you normally very quickly. One of the things a lot of officers do, and we have not, and I think the department encourages them to do that, is to make the best decision that they can whether or not to cite the person, meaning whether or not to give him or her a warning or a complaint. And one of the ways they do that is to go through the driver history. They can type in the information from a person's license and get the driver's history while they're in the car, and that will help them make a decision whether or not they were going to charge the person in court, give them a civil complaint, or just write a warning and let them go. And I think the more information that an officer has to try to make the right decision is good. In it, on the driver's history, you'll come back whether you have a traffic warrant, whether you have any traffic violations, or you may not have any violations on there, and then you're likely to get a warning. So that's a thing that, you know, is a tool that we've recently gotten, probably in about 8 or 10 years, and it's used a lot. I will say also that if somebody gets a ticket and is told to come into court, Brookline Court requires the officers to bring the driver's history into them, so that the clerks use that as a decision as well, as a tool in their decision making. So,
yeah. What do you see as, isn't, you know, it seems to me that whenever we hear a term like discretion, that's where we potentially run into trouble, right? So discretion can be a good thing, right? Like say, I get that there were some extenuating circumstances, the classic, I was on the way, someone's in the car in labor, like on the way to the hospital, right? Which is, ridiculously rare, but it seems to me that discretion in this case could leave room for bias to creep in. Isn't that the case?
I think you can do that anywhere. And I think the policies that the departments have in place guide your discretion. I don't think we can do our jobs without discretion. And I think that goes for every profession that's represented here at this meeting today. So I think discretion is a good thing. If you don't have discretion and you don't guide it through policy, then that's when you get into problems. And
right. I think one of the issues is that we've seen in the numbers that you've shown us on the speeding tickets in particular. I'm just pulling those back up again. Are these differences, and this one actually doesn't have the percentages. The one here's one that this one.
That's just the arrest, I think, right?
No, this is citation, civil infractions. Yeah, I'm looking down here at the percentages. And this is what we looked at before, was the sort of when stopped for speeding, who receives a warning versus a citation. And we see, some pretty big differences in some of the categories. And obviously, you don't need to be a data scientist to recognize that if you're white, you've got a much less chance of getting a civil infraction than if you're anything other than white. And so I think that's one of the issues that, one of those classic issues. We've got data in the annual report about disparities by race in terms of who gets stopped, and now we've got deeper data that doesn't appear in the annual report that even for those stopped, there are disparities in terms of who receives the ticket as well. So one of my concerns certainly is that that there seem to be some significant differences based on race, and trying to get to the bottom of why that might be and what we can do to change it. Hopefully everybody would share that same aim. Yeah. Let me see if there's any other questions from members of the task force. Almas.
Hi. So I was thinking about the conversation we had last time about these discrepancies, and also wondering, like, what about like the previous years? Like, if you could look at the previous years and see if things have gotten better or if things have gotten worse. Like, I think that data was like, I think 2018, 2019, I can't remember exactly, but if you go back, it'd be really interesting to see if there have been changes.
I don't know how far back the updated system has. I mean, we could try that, but I don't know. I picked 18 and 19 basically because 20 was an off year with COVID. And I thought that those 2 years, it was just, I could ask them to take a look. I just don't know everything that we can get out of there, but we can try. Well, how many years would you say? Like in the last 10 years, pick
Well, I
3
mean, maybe
years
not
out of
10, but, at least 3 or 4, maybe, just,
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going back to the screen. Other questions?
One other thing I would say is that the second email that I sent out there was a request made is how many Brookline residents get stopped versus out of town residents.
Right.
The Neil Harrington, the person who runs this, the civilian who runs the traffic stuff, he made this change in 2020 where he put a question on the form that the clerks enter. It's, are you a Brookline resident, yes or no? So we just said, are you a Brookline resident or are you not? And that's why we only have 2020's information.
Right. And so this is what I thought was up on the screen before, but now hopefully is on the screen. And when you look at the numbers, 86% of traffic stops in Brookline are non-Brookline residents, and 14% of those stops are Brookline residents. In 2020, again, as Dan said, this is the only data we have on this.
Yeah, it's up until the end of September.
Right. Through September. Okay.
And you see the numbers are low. I mean, that's, like I said, this is a COVID year.
Yeah. I see some hands up. Well, Amos, we got to you. Sorry about that. And Anne, I see you had your hand up.
Yes, and this is off topic, so I don't know if I should wait, but I'm wondering if use of force is a statistic that we've been looking at, or if we could get information about use of force by Brookline police officers in the last year, 2, 3.
Dan, is that something that the reform committee's been looking at?
No, but it's posted every year on our annual monthly report, 6-month report, and annual report.
Right, but as we're looking at the, sorry to interrupt, but as we're looking at the traffic data, we're finding things that are not listed on the annual report. And I'm just wondering, it seems like an important aspect of our work to look at that specifically. And I'm just wondering about deeper dive into the data, if possible.
We have those statistics going back. A couple of things I would say, we also participate in the, Brookline also participates in the national database that they're trying to get going, that not everybody voluntarily participates in, that gives the statistics on serious injuries and or death as a result of use of force. We put our data in there every month. And second thing is, if you take a look at what we count as use of force, it's a very liberal count in that we take it anything beyond compliant handcuffing. And that goes beyond a lot of departments that do not use that many categories. So you may see high numbers, but not high numbers. I'm saying numbers in the 20s and 30s, but take a look at what type of force was used.
Okay. Is there a way of getting
I'll get,
like we've done with the traffic stops?
I will take care of that. Yes.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Dan. Chi-Chi.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a point of discussion we had from the last meeting on the whole issue of the denominator, what you compare these statistics to. I wanted to let folks know I did a very rough, quick attempt at this. What I simply did was look at all the communities that surround Brookline and get the race statistics from the Boston Planning Department. I put that in the departmental analysis document, Google document. I guess I should have also cut it out into a separate chart so that you could see it. But I'll put the link to the departmental analysis Google Doc and let you know what page it's on. But basically, you know, in terms of just the stops itself from the year-end report, you know, I had noted that 16.8% of the stops involve Black motorists. If you look at the data from all the surrounding communities, Alston, Brighton, Fenway, Jamaica Plain, Longwood, Mission Hill, West Roxbury, and Newton, only Mission Hill has a population that's comparable to that percentage of 16%. So the other surrounding communities, there's some disparities between the number of stops and the population as well. It's a very rough cut. You know, if you were to do it right, you look at the actual populations, you try to crunch the numbers. I just didn't have time to do that. But I'll put the link in the document.
Thank you.
And what page it's on.
While you do that, I want to pull in, I see Todd Corain, our transportation administrator, has joined us, and I asked him, you know, he's been at some of these meetings, and I asked him if he'd be willing to pop in, if we can, Devin, if we can promote him, if he'd be willing to pop in. You know, one of the things on this question of the denominator, and what we're talking about essentially is, you know, statistically, how many Black motorists, Asian motorists, white motorists will we expect to be stopped as a fair number based on the amount that are passing through Brookline. We see 86% of stops are people who don't actually live in Brookline, but are actually passing through Brookline. And I know Todd needs to do a little bit more work and maybe can present something more thorough to us at a future meeting. But I just wanted to see, Todd, if you had any additional thoughts on sort of what the folks passing through Brookline, like what they look like, and if that gives us any insights as to what we should expect would be a fair number of stops, not specific numbers, but just that first idea maybe.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? It's the first time using the headset. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, essentially, when I talked to you and the subcommittee yesterday, I haven't done the, you know, I pledged to look at existing traffic volumes that we have. As you all know, Brookline is a pass-through town for morning commute and then evening commute. People coming through Brookline to get to Boston, then out of Brookline to get to Boston, and some coming, you know, through Brookline from Boston to get to the western suburb job centers and vice versa. So what I'll be able to do is to look at traffic counts we have on those main commuting routes that you think of, you know, east-west, Boylston Street, Beacon Street. You know, Independence Drive coming in from the West Roxbury, Dedham, Norwood area, Harvard Street or Washington Street coming in from the Alston, Brighton, Cambridge area, et cetera, and give you an idea of who's coming through. And when we look at these at peak hours. So we look at the morning peak hour commuting time and the evening peak hour commuting time. Since yesterday, I did start putting that together, and I looked at a 2018 CTPS study, which is the Central Transportation Planning staff for the Boston MPO, that just did a corridor study on Boylston Street, actually. And as you saw, Boylston Street has your highest numbers of citations per street. And what this study showed, just the peak hour, we have sort of two gateways that we refer to on the Boylston Street corridor. Gateway East, which is at River Road, where all the construction is right now, and then the Western Gateway, which is up in Newton. And when we looked at who's entering during those AM peak hours, it's generally 10% of the traffic, at least 10% of the traffic daily volume enters during that 1 hour peak AM period. And it was a 2-to-1 split for people entering Brookline at those. So between 700 to 800 people enter Brookline from Mission Hill, the Boston suburb, traveling westbound, and coming from the western suburbs as far away as where I commute in from, which is Auburn, out by Worcester. It was between 14 and 1,500 vehicles were actually entering. So, you know, I'm not a data scientist, but when you do this deep dive and you try to see who's coming through the town, who's, you know, what are the percentages of you know, the racial mix that might be getting stopped, you know, when you look at the traffic volume, certainly you would think that more people are coming through Brookline, and a higher percentage of those people would be more likely to be stopped. You know, coming from western suburbs that certainly have a less diverse racial mix than Brookline, and certainly than Boston. you know, as compared to those coming from, you know, sort of the city of Boston proper. But I'll be able to present a lot more data for you guys looking at these sort of gateway entrances and exits. And hopefully you'll be able to use that data to compare to, you know, citations to see, you know, what that denominator might be.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate that, and everybody that's been working on this. It's an essential question, right? You know, you know, what should we expect to see if in a sort of unbiased, you know, fair process based strictly on the, you know, the folks who are on the road, and we know that there are differences, and there have been numerous reports on particularly the racial differences between public transportation and those who are driving as well, and so hopefully we'll get into all of that. Dan, please.
I just wanted. The thing that we found out that was helpful to us, and I talked about it before, is the windshield survey that was done by Northeastern in 2009. The other committee, through Marty Rosenthal, had asked to see if we can replicate that study, because it was done, like I said, 10 years ago anyway. But what that was a group of graduate students as part of a study that we entered into as to who is actually involved in based on car accidents in Brookline. So the graduate students we picked up 5 or 6 intersections. They took what they believed to be the race and sex of the person driving the cars for a 4-hour period. And then they gave those stats to us. And we would compare them to our citations. And they were pretty equal on a lot of the categories. And then as the years went on, it started getting murky. But I'm actually going to ask Jack McDevitt or Amy Farrell, who had run the last study, if they would come back and replicate it. I don't see it being done until we get straightened out with COVID, because our traffic is not accurate where it was 2 years ago. But hopefully they would be willing to commit to do it again. And I think that was probably, Chichi, one of the most telling, because it was actually people that had no connection to the police department giving us their opinion of who is entering and exiting the town. So the only thing is they refuse to come in at night. They said they can't really see into a car and it gets dark. I asked them to put that in the report. It never showed up in the report, but they did not come in when it's dark. So they just did, I think it was 6 to 10 in the morning, maybe 3:30 to 7:30 in the afternoon. That was their windows.
Okay, I'm gonna, unless there's anyone that really wants to jump in here, I want to move us forward. You know, we'll revisit this, and we're gonna be talking more about this. Well, actually, we have next up is, I'm gonna get Malcolm in just a second. Next up is our sort of departmental analysis subcommittee is gonna be the first one to report out. So we'll probably even talk a little bit more about this, but Malcolm, go ahead.
I just, Chichi made a good comment. I put this in the chat the last time. I would hope we would like look at comparisons to suburbs that are through towns in terms of traffic that are more like us than, say, Weston or Newton or Wellesley. Like, I would hope we would look at places like Milton and Quincy for comparison. And like Milton and Quincy have their own, you know, issues around race as well. I don't want to deny that, but to me, all the more reason to look. Because those are places where there's a lot of traffic, where people leaving the city go through there to get to different places. You know, Quincy being really close to Dorchester, Milton being very close to Mattapan, but they're also near a lot of highways and throughways, 138, you know, all those other things, Galvin, all those. And I feel like when we do Brookline comparisons, we look at suburbs that aren't truly traffic similar. You know, Newton isn't really similar to us. It's just not. Like there's Route 9 and there's Com Ave and Beacon Street, but those look very different than our Com Ave and Beacon Street traffic. And so I think like, I would hope we would do that because, yeah, and just to be frank, yeah, I mean, that survey from 2009 has never really sat well with me. It just hasn't. And the time I looked at it closely, I had a bunch of things that I really questioned about it. And so, you know, we could do it, but I think we have to actually look at ourselves in relation to things that are similar, as opposed to, you know, Wellesley, which isn't really a similar traffic suburb. It may be similar in other ways as a suburb, but it's not similar in traffic.
But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that was a problem with the study that was done in 2004, is we were compared to all the communities out west, and that's not given where Brookline is. The only thing is, I would say, is I don't know what Milton Police or Quincy Police keep. I don't know if they do the stats. Nobody's required by law to do it. We do it. We've done it for 20 years because we wanted to do it. And I don't, I mean, I don't know if we can get the stats comparing them, but we could always check.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's fair.
I mean, you know, this may be, we'll talk more about it, but this may be, you know, an area where, you know, we may at some point need to, you know, we'll consider as part of our recommendations maybe, but commissioning a study, you know, that would incorporate the the traffic administrator's office, as well as looking at traffic stops and all that, and that might get to the bottom of this. But this is going to be, I think it'd be difficult based on the folks we have on this task force, and the time we have to do our work to reach, I think, meaningful conclusions about that without some deeper study here. But so anyway, we'll get to talking about the report in a little bit. Thanks, Malcolm, and thanks, Dan. Okay, subcommittee updates. Eitan, Chichi, Mike, anything that we haven't already talked about in terms of updates from our subcommittee?
I guess just it's worth just letting folks know that our last meeting before break, which is in 2 weeks, we will, before that, be providing the full committee with essentially a working document of our findings and recommendations. So I think what we discussed yesterday is that we'll give that document to everyone ahead of time and carve out some time for discussion at the full group meeting to talk through it.
Yeah. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, to Malcolm's point, the question of peer communities, Newton's not like us and Wellesley's not, and you're absolutely right. Geographically, they feel like western suburbs, not a close-in suburb, and so we do have some data that we've gotten together on comparable communities in terms of high income, located very close to or even surrounded by a major city, and there aren't a lot of examples of that, but combining that with the data for some of the suburbs that Chichi looked at, I think it's necessary to provide that information, even if we conclude that it doesn't mean a hell of a lot. One of the comments that Chichi made that was right on target. The correlation between spending is not with crime, but with with per capita income in the town. Higher income, they spends more on policing, whether it's needed or not is it's not clear. So the data is there to look at some comparable communities as opposed to looking at Wellesley or Belmont or something like that.
So Mike, I haven't really presented that chart that I presented to the departmental analysis subcommittee to the full task force. I did a analysis of some community of Cambridge and Boston, because we're always talking about them, and then some smaller communities that are comparable in population to us, like Malden and Weymouth, just to see if there are any patterns. And the only pattern, as Mike points out, that I could find is, even though a community like Malden has higher crime rates, and it's the same size as us, they spend less per capita on policing, and it seems to be just a function of per capita income. And I can put the Google link to that chart as well. I don't know if Mike, you're ready to share your chart, but I could put actually yours is not on Google Docs yet, mine is, so I'll put the link in the chat. And I'm happy to put your document on Google and make it shareable too, if you're ready for that. Roel, did you want me to give the full task force the bad news, since you kind of hinted at it before?
No, go on ahead, please.
Yeah, so you know, we've done all this work looking at traffic enforcement and the idea of, you know, trying to support or develop an argument as to why certain functions we may want to consider moving from armed police to civilians. The idea being that, you know, a lot of what we've seen nationally in terms of the most tragic incidents involve traffic stops. But there was a question of, well, can we even do that under the state law? And so I looked into it, and unfortunately, I think the answer is no, that Chapter 90, Section 2 of the Mass General Laws essentially vests power to issue traffic citations to police officers. And so we would need a state law change before we could move any of those functions to civilians. The idea of moving it to civilians, there haven't been a lot of communities that have tried it. Berkeley is going to try it. Cambridge was thinking about it until hit this log jam or hit this obstacle. New York City has some, but not all of its traffic enforcement functions in civilians, but those civilians are housed in the police department, and there's a discussion there to move them to the New York Department of Transportation. You know, as Roel said, this is the Reimagining Committee, so one of the things we might want to reimagine is advocating for state law changes on this.
And Chichi, same goes for automatic traffic enforcement, is that right?
Yeah, so automated traffic enforcement is not permitted in Massachusetts right now because there's no statute authorizing it. There has been a bill to authorize it. It narrowly was defeated in the Senate. It probably will come up next year. And so another recommendation could be that we would support it.
And we'll talk about that. I know there have been concerns in the past about automated traffic enforcement, surveillance, things like that. So
yeah,
you know, any version of it that this task force would support, I imagine would need to be very narrowly tailored in some way. But we may have that conversation. We're still we'll have our recommendations for the task force ready, as Eitan said, by the 18th. Right. Sorry, I'm getting some stuff blocking my window here. So the only other thing that I wanted to mention on this before we forget is there have been some essential questions about what is the value of, you know, there's I guess maybe two different ways to do a stop. Someone has done something routine, but it is an infraction of traffic law, stopping them and then either giving them a warning or a ticket based on, you know, previous driving behavior. And that's one version. And then the other version is, you know, sort of looking for things like whether there be warrants that are not related to traffic or anything like that, or searches or things like that. And Dan, let me just get you back in here because I feel like we didn't cover this in the last section. You know, you shared, and I didn't get to share this with folks, so I'll just put it up on the screen very quickly. And this is something that I need to look deeper into, particularly because these are all folks that there's a moving violation offense as well as an arrest. These are all coded, so we need to actually match all of these up with the appropriate codes, which Dan sent before last week's meeting. But there are a total of 70 minus 69 instances on here, but very few, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, where I mean, we see a lot with OUI and, you know, those kinds of things, but it seems a good number of these are a suspended license or in rarer cases a warrant, and those kinds of things. If you can just briefly reflect, I'm going to stop sharing this so we can see each other. And this is in the packet, folks. If you can briefly just reflect on, you know, one of the questions that we have is, what is the value of having police officers doing traffic stops? And what is the value of, I guess, the investigative work that takes place as part of a traffic stop currently, that we would lose if we went to a model where we simply, you know, ticketed someone for the violation and had them go about their way without that sort of deeper investigation?
Okay, well, first of all, that list that you have is, just remember, it's only traffic violations.
Right.
Arrests based on that. It's not the total number or types of arrests that the department makes.
Right.
I happen to think I'm in of the thought that to take traffic stops, the ability to make traffic stops away from the police department does make a community less safe. You have officers that are out there that everybody in the, unless you're going to change the country or the state, that everybody recognizes a police officer as somebody that is going to be able to pull you over if you commit a traffic violation. Cars are well marked. You take that away and an officer's stopped at a red light and the guy decides to go through the red light right next to him and causes an accident. Well, you can't blame the police officer. He or she can't take the, has no deterrent value just by being there or by being parked on the side of the road. I would be against moving it to civilian because I've seen, and we've had parking control officers who only do parking tickets get assaulted. We have had hot coffee thrown on them. And these are people that are writing a ticket and placing it on a car, and somebody comes out and sees the ticket on the car and doesn't like it, and bad stuff can happen. I don't think you can say that all of the traffic stops are risk-free, and then to put somebody there that is going to try to pull somebody over that may have just been leaving a crime, may not have, there's no way of knowing that. What kind of dangers does that put a unarmed, untrained civilian? And the police aren't notified, the police don't know, police don't go on there. Is there a danger to that person? I would say yes. There's always a danger to a police officer too, and they're armed. So short answer.
Chief O'Leary, do you mind if I quit in? Or do you mind if I cut in for just a second?
Well, short answer is that I happen to think that you take it away from the uniformed police officers, it's going to hurt public safety. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Raul, go ahead.
No, Alexander, go ahead.
Sure. So unless I was, pretty badly misreading Raul's question, I don't think he was actually asking about taking traffic stops away from the police. That's something that the task force is certainly debating, but at least the way I read his question to you was that it was about when a police officer makes a traffic stop, removing the additional investigation into non-traffic stop related activity, right?
Right.
So as part of running a person's criminal history while making the traffic stop, not going and doing the arrests for the warrant that's outstanding and similar issues. And I did want to just sort of briefly say, this is something that I've observed a handful of times over the course of our meetings. I think you do an outstanding job in providing us with information, and your answers to our questions have been incredibly helpful and generally very respectful. There's this one thing that does occasionally happen that I've noticed is that you seem to respond not to questions asked, but in order to defend your perspective on the way the police should work that is outside of sort of what's being asked to you. And that's the thing that's a little bit concerning to me.
I can take that in consideration, but part of my role here, like I said last time, is to give what I feel is best, or what I feel is my opinion as serving 41 years as a police officer. And I think that I don't do that if I keep my mouth shut sometimes. And if you pick that out, that's what Raul was asking me, but the whole conversation is around civilian being given traffic enforcement. So I understand your point of view. I see it. I don't necessarily agree with it.
All right, I want to make sure we have time for other subcommittees. I'm going to dig deeper into that that chart that I just showed there. I'll pull up the codes and all that kind of stuff, and maybe I'll work with Dan to do that. So it's a little bit more clear exactly what those what moving violations were attached to those 69 circumstances. But I think it's an essential question for us is going to be you know, what is the value proposition for, you know, I think all of us would be on board with making sure that we do whatever it is we can do to keep our roads safer for ourselves and for our families and for our neighbors, of course. The question is, you know, or at least an essential question I have is whether or not this additional investigatory work that takes place as part of traffic stops provides sufficient value that it outweighs the cost that we've been talking about for weeks now, in terms of particularly to communities of color, but frankly to all residents that are subjected to these investigations, and not just residents of Brookline, but all drivers that are subjected to these investigations. So anyway, we'll leave that there, and I want to hear from. We've got some time to hear from the other subcommittees. You know, just give us a heads up where you are, and if there's anything you need from us in particular, or if you wanted to preview what might be coming our way, please let us know. The next one on the list is the Envisioning Community Engagement.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off my video while I speak, because the past couple of times I've tried to do updates, it seems like it just gets overwhelmed. So okay. Just wanted to give a heads up on that. I'm going to ask, I'm going to try to call in several other members of this subcommittee as I take us out, and then want to hear what the rest of the folks have to say. We've had relatively little time on clock as a subcommittee, I think largely because folks are leaning in heavily into their secondary assignments. There's a fair amount of what we're trying to accomplish, even as a task force. And so a number of the issues that I think we're asked to contend with as the Envisioning subcommittee are also present in a number of our other secondary or additional subcommittee assignments. That being said, we've largely tried to use a set of working documents, making sure that we can exchange ideas, resources. And I think we have a pretty clear understanding of what we want to accomplish and what we want to do. But some concern about the capacity and the resources to do it. I think as a group, we agree that we want to both to surface, lift up and center voices of folks who are often most adversely impacted by the current system of public safety that we have in place, both here in Brookline and then nationally, and have relatively little capacity to convene focus groups, larger discussions, forums, both given what's happening right now with COVID and just the magnitude of that project in general. I think there's also a motion out on the table among our subcommittee is that a community-based and a community-driven public safety and justice process is what we would aspire to. But to do that, we would need to be able to bring in voices from the community to help us understand whether or not the police system that we have, or the public safety and policing system that we have, is the one that we actually want. We learned during the hearing that it's not difficult for us to get voices that are in support of the system as it currently exists. It's more difficult to surface voices and perspectives of folks who might have different things that they want us to consider about a system of public safety and policing. And so I think we're all contending with just the magnitude of that work to try to get those additional groups, again, whether it's focus groups, larger convenings, they're just not on the table to be able to do right now as easily. So I'll pause there and see whether or not the other subcommittee members feel like this is an accurate accounting of where we are.
I am happy to pick up from there. That is an accurate accounting, but not, this is not us throwing in the towel. This is laying out of where we're at. So it has been incredibly difficult to meet as a group, but we do have some balls rolling. There's the task force website. We have someone willing to design it, to get it off the ground. And as a function of the envisioning and community engagement, I think it's integral. We can control messaging there. We can have a central place website on flyers. It also lays the groundwork for us to start seeing beyond this task force, because obviously our job is enormous, and our relationship building needs to be long-term. So it makes it clear that, you know, I'm not committing anybody here to this work beyond the task force, but I know myself will be thinking about this beyond the task force. So I think as we begin to build relationships with people, it's not going to be, well, we're doing this work until February and then we're done, so please give us all your information. It's more like, we have this push right now, we're trying to make recommendations, but also we are going to fight further down the road for what we want, what you want as a community to come from this. Let's see. So it also sets us up for our events, which we haven't been able to do yet, but can easily be done. Focus groups and town halls and things like that. We have a central location to have that information to be able to send people to. Also, this website will be separate from the town website, so we can begin to lay those kind of roots that, yes, we are a group pulled together by the town right now, but the work is not run by the town right now. This is a recommendation producing group. So we're building the tools to be able to move forward with this. What else? So I designed a flyer, which I'm gonna kind of straddle walk and talk and community engagement right now. I also want to invite anyone else from the subcommittee to interrupt me before I go too deep on all this. Just whatever, jump in. So I designed a flyer that is originally started as a walk and talk thing because we are trying to engage the community. It started to be apparent to me as I was thinking about this website and branding and all that and writing this, and together with the subcommittee writing the flyer, that it needs to be more efficient. So if we're gonna put the effort out to cover BHA and a bunch of areas in town with flyers, we better get a lot of bang for the buck. So I should actually just screen share it. If anyone has that, I sent it out to both the SRO committee and our walk and talk committee. If anyone has access to that while I'm talking and put it in the chat, that would be great. But so the idea would be to have this flyer that both has our description, who we are, why we're doing this, inviting people to talk to us. We now have a dedicated email address. We have a dedicated Google voicemail, so people can contact us right from the flyer. We have a series of questions, like for instances that we want to invite conversation around. So initially it was going to be walk and talk questions. Do you have walk and talk in your neighborhood? How do you feel about this? On and on and on. And then, so now it covers both walk and talk and school resource officers, because those are the most, the subcommittees that are reaching out for most input.
Bonnie, I can share it if you like.
Yes, please.
You all seeing that or no?
Not yet.
Hold on, let me try again. Share issues today. Give me 1 second. Okay. Hopefully it will work this time. How about that?
Yeah. You can, if you scroll down, there's a little thing to make the flyer bigger.
This one?
The 33%, yeah, or that.
Yeah. Whoa, there we go.
Look at that. So before we get this, that M on the .com should not be over where it is. That will be adjusted. Mm-hmm. So for us to put this out, we need all of your, you gotta approve it and let me know what you think, if there's something you don't like in the wording or whatever, the imaging. But so this would be a tool so we don't have a walk and talk effort, you know, a branding effort and whatever. I'm not sure what the SRO committee is working on. I didn't hear back from anybody on that yet. So that's what I'm thinking. This is kind of a larger community engagement / envisioning effort between the website and this work. I think that covers everything. Right now, all contact information is connected to my phone and my Google account, but it can very easily be connected to yours as well. And it will, the intention would be that there would be a central location, and anything that comes in pertaining to another subcommittee would be forwarded on, but you can also use the Google Voice number. You just sign in with your own phone. We do that with Mutual Aid Brookline. It's really good to keep everybody's information anonymous. And yeah, we can have emails forwarded from the Google thing, the Google address.
Great. I think it looks terrific. Does anybody have any objections to using this flyer or to the approach? Hearing none. Let's go ahead and move forward. Yeah. Oh, Alexander, sorry.
Sorry. This might be really silly. First of all, can I just say it looks gorgeous? So great job.
Thank you.
This might be totally just me. I am generally against like the use of academic language, particularly in like public education and public outreach pieces. I know that, you know, being a law student, I have a tendency to like reach for like really kind of complex phrasing and big words. And there are folks who struggle with that. And also are turned off by that of like, oh, you know, these are folks who aren't trying to connect with me. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that there are lots and lots of people who don't have a problem with that. I don't know how people feel, if that's something we would want to adjust. I think it looks beautiful as is, but I think it's something that we might want to consider.
I am very happy to put the link to our, the text that we put in here so anyone can edit it. I agree with you and I tried to do that. And if it hasn't gone far enough, please jump in and add your 2 cents because I don't want to, there's no reason I need to lead with that. So let me find it and I'll put it up. I see, Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, I think that it is a beautiful piece of work. Graphically, it just hits. It's great. But it's sort of along the lines of what Alexander's talking about, and almost the opposite, unfortunately. You may want to look at the questions in the Tufts survey and see whether there's any way to get some of that information out to people. And you might want to mention the Tufts survey, although if this is going to go out after it, then it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I picture this being able to be printed and out hopefully by the end of this coming week. I mean, this is a physical job. Like we're going to have to get a team of people to go physically put these up everywhere. And we do this for Mutual Aid Brookline a lot, but you know, anyone here, I would love your help doing that, but it's going to require people having the time and space to do that. So I don't know if timeliness is a thing to add the survey to this.
Okay.
But
getting the questions so that when you do get data back, we can look at them and the answers in terms of the survey might be useful.
Sorry, finish. I'm cutting you off.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I think that the way that I'm thinking about this is that this is not, these are cues for conversation. So this would be on a lamppost or something, or that's actually, we're probably not supposed to post them on lampposts, but this will be somewhere that someone sees it. They're not going to be able to take it with them and answer specific questions. I think this is like, I put the questions on there to make it clear that this is the perspective that we're thinking about this data gathering, that we want to know if walk and talk makes you feel comfortable or if you feel surveilled, not just leaving walk and talk as a subject for conversation. So these are more, and all of this is also, please edit. But that's the idea I was thinking about. Like, I wanted to make it clear that everybody's input in how we are provided public safety is important. We invite criticism, we invite stories, we invite all of this. We are not here to, this is not, I don't know. That was the perspective of those questions. So not so much like, give me answers to these very specific questions. It's more like, please, we want to address these things in a conversation. Right. Does that make sense?
It does. I think, I mean, we're asking for some anecdotes in the survey as well, and that's where I think there's some crossover. The other thing is, if there's any way to put this up in social, in a form that is on social media.
Oh yeah.
Then that would, that would spread it more widely.
Yes, we'll be all over the social medias.
Good. Okay. Great. Nice work.
Really great. I want, Anne, I see you have a question, but I also know that you're part of at least a couple, one or more subcommittees that want to have a chance to report out too. So if you've got a quick one, go ahead.
It's quick, and I'm just wondering if we might be able to add a line in it about, have you had experiences with police when in crisis, like something to tie in the vulnerable people subcommittee would be great. I don't want to overwhelm it because there's a lot of writing on the page, but if we could get that in too, that would be helpful.
Yes, any input you all can give me, edit the paragraph and the questions, please send it. I'm gonna, while other subcommittees are talking, I will put that link into the chat. So if, and this kind of straddles the walk and talk, and Kimberly, if there's anything else y'all want to add about that.
Let's roll right into walk and talk then.
Well, that's kind of it. This push to, this flyer was a part of this. We developed in walk and talk the language for it. And then it got swooped into community engagement, and now it's all one big ball. So
if I could just add one thing about what Bonnie was saying about our branding, and I we're just gonna drive it, but multiple times this week by people who've been pulled and asked questions from the town who aren't exactly connected to this. When I talked to them, they said, "Oh, we're the group that wants to abolish police and defund it." So I think, the work Bonnie's talking about is just so very important. And I just want all the people on the task force to know, like that is really out there. I can't tell you where it's coming from or who's pushing it and what it is, but that is, again, it was multiple people in multiple different environments where those were told to me. And I was like, oh, I'm on that. Mm-hmm. I've never heard that language in any meeting. It's not in our minutes. It's not like right. I've never heard that once. In ed school, I was once told perception is reality.
Right.
If people perceive you're an unfair teacher, you're an unfair teacher. And so I just want everybody to hear that. And so I just so appreciate, this branding opportunity.
I'm glad. Thank you. I think we should take this website really, really seriously in that way. All of the outward facing things we do has to be, we got to really communicate in a uniform way so that people are really clear on what we're trying to do. So Alexander and anyone else, that's super important with that paragraph you're talking about. So how I kind of think about that as, we have our charge, and now we can revisit that charge as this new paragraph at the top, which will probably be text for the top of the website. So it's really, really important that we all participate in drafting that. So please, please, please help us out here. Yes.
Well, let's then move on to our school resource officer. We've got, fortunately, we're at 17 minutes remaining in this meeting. So let's see if we can keep it to just the highlights with an understanding that we'll have another bite at this next Friday. SRO group.
I can speak to what happened on Monday if other folks aren't comfortable, but I'm also happy to take a step back. Okay. Interesting story. This past Monday, we were set up to do an interview with the current SRO at Brookline High School, Caitlin Keneally, and her supervisor, whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, but who was there as well. And it started well, began productively, and we were starting to get into asking our questions. And we were Zoom bombed repeatedly. Kristen and I tried valiantly to eject people from the meeting, but the trouble is they were coming in and leaving so fast, like they didn't stay for more than several seconds at a time, such that by the time you clicked on somebody to eject them, they'd be gone. And we tried to continue the meeting, and it was ultimately just so disruptive that we locked it. And due to both concerns about, that not being okay under the town meeting law, and primarily because we were just really shaken up by what happened, we closed the meeting, and we're going to try to do the interview another time. But the reason folks were so shaken up about it is that the majority, I would say, of what was happening was people coming in and saying the N-word repeatedly. It was racist. It was disturbing. It was awful. A lot of it was sexualized as well. There was pornography. There was a small minority of folks who were like, F the police, once they noticed that there were police officers there. It's not clear whether this meeting was targeted because of who, because of this task force, or because the police were there, or whether it was a random thing that occurred. We know that the link to our meeting was posted on Twitter. I actually, because it was done through my school's email account, I got a lovely email from my school IT. But it was awful, and should never have happened.
I was there to just watch the meeting, and same assessment as Alexander. It was terrible, and appreciate well, first of all, sorry for everyone that was on that call that had to listen to those things and deal with that. And I appreciate Alexander, and I know Kristen was in there also trying to help rein in this meeting and try to continue the meeting and make it as productive as possible. And of course, apologies to our guests, Officer Keneally and Officer or Sergeant Hatchett for who took the time to be there with the subcommittee and had that time interrupted in the worst possible way. So I'm glad that you all are going to try to do it again, because it did appear to be a constructive conversation that was happening there. And that important information was being gleaned by the subcommittee. So, hopefully you'll have another opportunity for that. I know Devin's working with you to figure out, to put together a link in the appropriate firewalls, so to mitigate the possibility that something like that happens again. And for any of the subcommittee chairs, please connect with Devin, or maybe Devin connect with you to make sure that you've got the appropriate firewalls to try to prevent those things from happening. Yeah. Anything else to share, Malcolm?
I appreciate what Alex said, and actually taking it for the team and sharing. It was painful in a way I had never felt, in terms of racism. Like, I've experienced plenty of racism, but it was just really, it's painful in a way that I just hadn't. I'll leave it at that. But the one thing I would really want to point out to this group as a whole is actually from the meeting before that, where Michael Downey came and talked to us about school resource officers and like the legal, and he presented a document that we had never seen before. And I would like to actually track down its publication. It's the SRO fact sheet that came out. And most of our work this entire time has been with the idea that there was only one school resource officer, but that sheet has 4. And unfortunately, I mean, Casey was doing a great job answering, but unfortunately, that was when the Zoom bombing really took off. And so, like, we couldn't get really in depth about it. Yeah, that fact sheet, that's, I think it's on our part of the website or whatever. I can't, it's a little hazy, just frankly, from the last meeting. But that fact sheet, I think, is actually really important because it conjured a lot more questions for me in terms of who's sort of driving, who's the driving force behind school resource officers. Is it school, police, both, or none? And I don't have answers to that yet. Yeah.
Okay.
I do want to also just briefly say, I should have spoken more about what happened with Michael Downey, who I noticed is here today. So thank you for taking the time to come and speak with us. Feel free to read the minutes for a clearer explanation of everything we talked about. We got pretty well into the weeds about the law, but moral of the story is, so far as we can tell, Brookline is in many ways falling short of the specifications around the SRO that are required by the law, but also let's say the floor, like the minimum that we're required to do, is fairly low, and we're above it right
now. All right, thank you very much. And by the way, we're going to go into our final subcommittee update. Almas appropriately commented to me that maybe we should change the order in the future so that the same committees aren't always going last and have the least amount of time. So that is a smart comment. I've asked Devin to reverse the order of subcommittee updates for the next meeting, and maybe we can just kind of flip back and forth going forward in terms of that order. So that the same folks aren't always going last with the least amount of time. Thank you, Devin, and thanks, Almas, for bringing that up. All right, so Almas and others for the Vulnerable People and People in Crisis Subcommittee. Love to hear from you.
I'll get started, and then Anne and Alexander, please jump in. So we actually had a meeting yesterday. We sort of tried to work backwards. We know that the final report is due early February. And so we wanted to figure out the things that we need to work on. And so one of the things, I think, Raul, you had recommended we look at international programs. So we have started to look at those. We want to kind of incorporate some of those in our final report as well. The other thing that we've also wanted to focus more on, we've focused a lot on mental health crises, but not enough on unhoused people and also people with substance abuse issues. So we want to also do a little bit more work on that. So we incorporate those kind of alternatives. And so that's what we'll try to do in the next couple of weeks. We're also want to see if we can connect with somebody from Cahoots and set up a time to talk through as we develop our recommendations. We want to make sure that we, if we thought that would be a good idea, and Anne knows some people there that she can reach out to. And then the other thing is, I listened into the police reform, the full committee the other day on Wednesday, and it sounds like they're also creating a kind of another subcommittee on mental health crises and unhoused people and substance abuse. And we're kind of curious as to what they're doing. We assume it's going to be more like specific reforms within the police department, but we thought it might be a good idea for us to listen in, into their subcommittee meetings. So that's something, depending on time, we might want to do. And then the meeting that we had held previous to that, because we didn't meet on Thanksgiving Day, we also talked about our charge on domestic violence issues, and we decided that actually we voted to not include domestic violence and take that out of our scope, but we want to, I don't know whether how official that has to be, whether we need to change something, or does it come up during the select board or something, but we just wanted to put that, let you know, Rahul, that we want to really, we're really only going to focus on mental health, substance abuse, and unhoused people. And that we made this decision after much deliberation, where we didn't think domestic violence quite fit into our scope. And then the last thing I want to just say is that we are also going to try to look at what else is out there, like in the community, what are the resources that already exist, and find out more information about those, and also put that into our final document, because I think we need to know what's out there as well as, so that we know what the gaps are. So again, Alex and Anne, do you want to add anything?
I think you summed it up well. Obviously, it's a huge charge, and we're trying to do as much work as we can before February to put together something that is useful in terms of moving forward and make some recommendations. And obviously, this isn't going to be set completely by February, and continuing this work is really important as well.
Someone's literally leaf blowing right outside the window. That's fun. But they are electric leaf blowers, which is like, nope, never mind, gas. Unfortunately. So I'll just say thank you for those updates. I think two things I wanted to, can you hear me okay? Is it pretty bad? All right. Two things I wanted to pick up on there. One was around issue in unhoused people and supports there. One of the things I learned this week was that that the Brookline Center doesn't actually have like a street team that engages with unhoused people, and that's being handled at this point exclusively by the police department with support from the Department of Public Health at the state level. And so, just something to think about. We have these tremendous, this tremendous resource in our community that isn't engaged in that particular way. And I wonder what it might look like to engage those professionals in that work. What, obviously there'd be costs associated with that. But really, just something that came to mind for me. And then the other piece around, I understand that, there are times when the reform committee is sort of almost on parallel tracks with our work. I think that's okay. I feel like this has come up a few times, and maybe Marty Rosenthal will put another comment in the chat about that being an issue. I don't think it's an issue. I think it's okay. I think we're approaching some of these same issues from different angles. I do think in the future, and I'm looking forward to post-February and what all of our recommendations might be. And I do think that there's going to come a time when we start to say, neither the work of the Reform Committee nor the Reimagining Committee will ever truly be complete, and certainly not by February. And what might it look like for these bodies, certainly ours at least, to recommend a future body to continue to do that work, whether or not this task force becomes a permanent committee, whether or not you all agree to serve on it or other people serve on that. I'm not committing you to work beyond what you've already agreed to. But that's certainly something that's been in the back of my mind. It's clear in all of these areas that we're studying that there's going to need to be further work. Most notably, I would say, in the community engagement piece, which I think that all the folks that have been involved in that work are 100% right. We need to engage long-term to actually, figure out what the pain points are for people in our community, and then figure out what they think about proposed solutions and what solutions they might have to those. So anyway, I just wanted to address all of that all at once. But all right, any other thoughts or anything we missed? We've got 3 minutes, and so whatever you want to say has got to be quicker than that, so we can get everybody out of here in time. All right. Well, the other thing I'll say is, like I said, we've got 2 meetings. We've got December 11th and December 18th before. We'll take a break for a couple weeks and rejoin that first, I think it's January 8th. We'll be back together again. Your subcommittees should continue to meet as you're able to do so. So keep doing that as you're able. And let us know what you need in the interim. It's been a really busy time for those of us that have been involved in town meeting. That is now over. I'm looking forward to not participating, but at least joining and participating where necessary. Your subcommittee meetings, so I can have more firsthand experience as exactly what you're talking about, who you're talking to, and listen in on those conversations and be as helpful as possible. So a little bit more free time now that town meeting's over for a few of us on this call. So if there's anything else that we need to talk about, reach out offline. I'm happy to do that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all. Thanks for your service. Appreciate all the staff for your support. We'll talk to you again next week, if not sooner. Take care.